The city bus groaned as it braked sharply at the next stop, its doors creaking open like tired lungs expelling a breath. Caleb stepped up into the vehicle, his boots dragging slightly as if they were made of concrete. His shoulders sagged under the weight of exhaustion. 12 hours hauling pallets and unpacking shipments at the distribution center had sapped every last drop of energy he had. Each step he took felt deliberate, calculated, as if his body demanded payment for every movement. His backpack tugged at one shoulder, and he adjusted it absently, his eyes scanning the crowded bus for a place to sit. The usual assortment of passengers filled the seats and stood in clusters near the poles. College students hunched over their phones, their thumbs working furiously across cracked screens. Office workers sat slumped in their seats, briefcases tucked between their knees, their gazes distant as if they'd already retreated to some faraway place in their minds. And then there were people like Caleb, worn out, drained, and just trying to make it home in one piece. He shuffled down the narrow aisle, gripping the overhead rail for balance as the vehicle swayed. About halfway back, he spotted an empty seat, threadbare and stained, but it was a place to rest. He moved toward it, muttering a quiet, "Excuse me," as he squeezed past a man whose headphones were blasting some bass-heavy rhythm. With a soft grunt, Caleb lowered himself onto the seat, his muscles thanking him with dull relief. As he leaned back, his head resting against the window pane, he exhaled slowly. His eyelids grew heavy, and for a fleeting moment, he allowed them to drift closed. The muted rumble of the engine blended with the indistinct murmur of voices around him. Horns honked in the distance. The smells of exhaust and city streets lingered faintly in the air, but Caleb found a moment's peace in the gentle vibrations of the moving bus. He thought back to his shift, stacking boxes until his arms burned, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, stealing sips from his battered water bottle during the rare, quiet minutes. Life was a grind, but he told himself he was making it work. One day at a time, one box at a time. Then the rhythm of the bus shifted. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but something instinctual told him to open his eyes. He did, glancing around to find the source of the disturbance. Just a few steps away, an elderly woman stood clutching the metal pole with thin, trembling hands. Her fingers were pale, knuckles whitened from the strain of keeping herself upright. She wore a faded gray coat that had once been blue, and a scarf knotted neatly beneath her chin. Her hair, silver and pulled back into a tidy bun, shimmered faintly in the dim light of the bus. A pang of guilt stabbed Caleb in the chest. She shouldn't be standing. Not her age. He glanced around the bus again, hopeful someone closer to her might notice. But the other passengers remained oblivious, heads down, eyes locked on screens, ears filled with music, attention anywhere but here. With a quiet groan, Caleb forced himself to stand. His legs protested immediately, but he ignored the stiffness and pain. Turning toward the woman, he offered her a small, tired smile. "Ma'am," he said gently, "please take my seat." She blinked in surprise, as if she hadn't expected anyone to acknowledge her presence, let alone offer her kindness. For a heartbeat, she hesitated, her pride warring with the clear fatigue in her bones. But then, with a nod and a quiet, "Bless you, young man," she accepted. Carefully, she lowered herself onto the seat Caleb had vacated. He grasped the nearest pole and planted his feet, adjusting his stance as the bus lurched forward again. The discomfort didn't matter. It was the right thing to do. He didn't think much of it after that. It was a simple gesture, nothing extraordinary. The city rolled by in blurred streaks of light and shadow as the evening deepened. Caleb let his mind wander again, imagining the warmth of his tiny apartment, peeling off his steel-toed boots, and collapsing on his worn-out couch. But just as the bus slowed for another stop, he felt a tap on his arm, gentle, almost hesitant. He turned his head and found the old woman looking at him. Her eyes, a pale, watery blue, held an intensity that made him pause. Without saying a word, she reached into her coat pocket and withdrew a small, folded piece of paper. She pressed it into his hand, her fingers warm and thin like parchment. Caleb looked down at the paper, confusion flickering across his face. Before he could ask anything, the bus doors sighed open, and the woman rose with surprising grace. She stepped off the bus, vanishing into the night as quietly as she had appeared. The doors shut behind her, and the bus rolled on. Caleb stared at the note in his hand, its edges soft and frayed from repeated handling. His thumb traced its creases as he wondered what in the world had just happened. Why had she given him this? Heart pounding slightly, he slipped the note into his pocket but found his thoughts swirling. He kept replaying the moment. The quiet, meaningful look in her eyes, the weight of her hand on his as she passed him the paper. When a stop arrived, Caleb stepped off the bus, his boots scuffing the cracked pavement. He pulled out the note again, turning it over in his fingers before carefully unfolding it. The handwriting inside was shaky, uneven, yet purposeful. 145 Pine Street, 6 p.m. Tonight. Trust me. He read it again. And again. His watch read 5:15 p.m. Less than an hour. He should go home. That was the reasonable thing to do. But his feet didn't listen. He found himself walking, not toward his apartment, but in the opposite direction, toward Pine Street. His pulse thudded in his ears as he weaved through the crowds, crossing streets, ignoring the cold breeze that slipped between the buildings. By the time he reached West Pine, the sun had all but disappeared, leaving the street bathed in deep shadows. He slowed, scanning building numbers. 137, 139, 143, and finally, 145. He stopped. The building in front of him was nothing like he expected. It was an old, stately house, grand, yet worn at the edges. Ivy crawled along its brick facade, and tall iron gates stood sentry at the front walk. A single lantern flickered beside the doorway, its light golden and soft against the gloom. Caleb checked his watch again. 5:58 p.m. His fingers brushed the paper in his pocket as if for reassurance. He had come this far. No turning back now. With a deep breath, he approached the gate. It opened with a creak, and he stepped through, the sound of his boots crunching softly on gravel. He made his way up the path, his gaze flickering over the shuttered windows and carved wooden door. At exactly 6 o'clock, he lifted the brass knocker, a lion's head, and let it fall with a hollow thud. Seconds passed. Then the door creaked open. A tall man, perhaps in his mid-50s, stood there. He wore a dark suit that fit him perfectly, his silver-streaked hair neatly combed back. His eyes, sharp, assessing, met Caleb's with a flicker of recognition. "You must be Caleb," the man said, his voice calm, yet carrying weight. Caleb swallowed. "Yeah, I think so. I mean," he fumbled in his pocket and held up the note. "Someone on the bus gave me this." The man nodded once. "My mother," he said simply. Caleb stared at him. "Your mother?" "The lady on the bus." "Yes," the man replied. "Her name was Evelyn." He stepped aside, and Caleb hesitated for only a moment before crossing the threshold. The house smelled faintly of lavender and old books. The walls were lined with photographs, sepia-toned images of another time, black and white portraits in ornate frames. Evelyn appeared in many of them, younger, vibrant, always with a kind smile. The man gestured toward a chair in the sitting room. "Please, sit." Caleb did so, the upholstery plush beneath his weary frame. The man took a seat across from him. "My name is Henry Whitaker," he said, "and my mother told me about you." Caleb shifted. "I didn't do anything. I just gave her my seat." Henry's expression softened, and that meant more to her than you could imagine. He rose, crossing to a desk and returning with an envelope. He handed it to Caleb. "This is for you." With hesitant fingers, Caleb opened it. Inside was a letter, written in the same shaky handwriting. "Caleb, if you are reading this, then I am gone from this world. But I needed you to know that your kindness gave me something I thought I had lost: hope. In a world that often forgets compassion, you reminded me that good people still exist. I spent my life searching for someone like you. Enclosed, you will find the deed to this home and access to a trust fund. My son, Henry, We'll explain the details. But know this, it is yours. Use it well. Thank you for seeing me. Evelyn Whitaker. Caleb's hands trembled as he read, and when he looked up, Henry gave a small nod. She chose you because you didn't think twice about helping. And that's exactly the kind of person she wanted to leave this to. Caleb opened his mouth, but no words came. I don't deserve this, he whispered. Henry smiled faintly. That's why you do. For the first time in years, Caleb felt something deep and powerful settle in his chest, a calling greater than he ever imagined. And so, with one simple act of kindness on a city bus, his life changed forever.